Hello everyone and welcome back. My name is Mark. I am your very cold driver this evening, and I know you can't see it 'cause it's in the shade, the shadow, it's nighttime, but this is a Buick. This is a Buick Encore, not an Encore GX. This came before that. It's just an Encore. This one is from 2018. It is all-wheel drive, painted in silver with a black interior, probably the way I would spec it for the Canadian market. Maybe not the silver, I'd maybe go with a darker color or a color, just because I'm not a fan of black or gray cars. We need more diverse colors on the road. You know, we need exciting colors, but that's not really what I'm talking about in this video. I've just gotten sidetracked out of passion for colorful cars. And we'll step inside because I'm very cold. Oh. And we're greeted with a very lovely cabin. And the outside of this car, I will say, proportionally it's a bit challenged, just in that it's very tall and very narrow, which has a few sacrifices. The first of which is your center console, that is basically all just storage, and for armrest you get a flip down one for the driver but not the passenger, which is a bit odd, but that's okay. The second concession you're going to have to make is with traction control. And so with traction control, you can turn off traction anytime you'd like, and you can keep traction off as long as you'd like. But stability control will reactivate after 60 kilometers an hour or 37 miles per hour. Probably, if I had to guess, for similar reasons that the early Mercedes A-classes had to have stability control retrofitted to them. If you don't understand that, they had a tendency to fall over. And I feel as though this car is potentially also going to fall over. But, I mean, not when you're driving, but without stability control, and if you absolutely hammered it, you could probably get it to flip over. No rational, regular, normal person in a sound state of mind will ever do that. I don't think anyone's ever done that, actually. But as far as interior goes, piano gloss black plastic down here. If you're wondering what that looks like after 4 years of ownership, this is what it looks like. It's pretty grubby and scratched up and gross, but I suppose you could maybe, I don't know, buff it out. I don't really know how that all works. These climate control knobs are a little bit loose, so they're not the most premium feeling, but I'm glad that they're here. They're illuminated, they're backlit, they look good. They actually feel pretty good. They're reasonably tactile. They all do things. Heated seat for the first two passengers. Rear seat does not get climate controls, which is to be expected from the segment or for a cheap car. And we'll get back to that later. You've got a heated steering wheel though, all the comfort you need. You've got a rear wiper, which is very comically small, and front wipers for your comically large windshield. And this interior space is actually kind of funny because the car is so narrow, but it's so tall, and you're sitting so far back because the windshield is very sloped that it feels like, it just feels like almost a vaulted ceiling or something like that. So it feels very spacious, almost like a dome. Forgive me for that. But in other notes, we've got probably the hardest soft touch material I've ever felt up here, but it is still soft touch and it is still nice. It's not scratchy or anything. It's comfortable if you're one of those people that likes to rest their arm up here. Down here, this is some harder, scratchier plastic that leads into the door bin, which is fine because I don't want to scuff up leather on a door card. This is a padded armrest, which you actually don't get in a lot of cheap or economy cars nowadays. Like the Chevrolet Trax, the new one, just gets hard plastic here. But this is nice and soft. You can rest your arm on it nice and comfortably. This is actually contoured out, so your elbow fits really nice and snugly where it's supposed to there. Manual handbrake, cup holders, center storage, little cubbies in the doors, just lots of smart implementations of space in here. So we'll turn the lights off now, and we'll see what the interior is like in the dark. Probably turn that down, and we'll go for a drive. Now, I have mentioned cheap cars in this video a handful of times so far, and I just want to make it clear that when I say cheap car, you know, that a lot of people get very up in arms about that, and I think that cheap cars get kind of a bad rap, or at least calling something a cheap car makes it sound poorly built. But cheap car to me really just means the price. There can be plenty of merits for a cheap car. I don't even know if you can see the air quotes, it's very dark in here. But just because something's cheap doesn't make it inherently bad or wrong or lesser than. And I think this car's a perfect example of this, because if you just want an A to B car that gets decent gas mileage, it's not fantastic, but it's decent, has a, you know, a decent amount of pep to get you around, it's a pretty solid option. And now that it's depreciated a little bit, I think it's a pretty crazy value. I think if you can scoop one of these up on a deal, oh my god, you're gonna love it. You're gonna be so happy with this, because it is appointed exactly how it's got all the basics. It's got Apple CarPlay, it's got a stereo, it's got heating and AC, it's got heated seats, it's got a heated steering wheel, it's got navigation, it has OnStar, like it's got blind spot monitoring, a reverse camera. Like the list goes on and on for reasons to buy this car as just a basic, you know, don't even think about it, like just daily transportation. As a transportation utility device, this is absolutely wonderful. And it doesn't make you feel like you're giving a whole lot up, which is awesome. Because some cars, like I said about the armrest, it's you get in them and like you just get a solid plastic piece for your armrest and you're like, okay, well, I could have just taken the subway and sat on a plastic chair there, but I'm buying a car, so I have something just a little bit nicer. And I think this is just that perfect amount of little bit nicer. You've got leather wrapped steering wheel, like leather wrapped dash, leather seats. It's a comfortable car to be in, and even though it is an economy car at its roots, it is a lifted hatchback SUV crossover thing, and it is the exact kind that I don't really love, because I find that it's not tremendously purposeful. It doesn't need to be as high up as it is, and it doesn't need to perhaps look the way that it does. But it's for people who, you know, need a runaround and are maybe a little bit intimidated by larger trucks or vehicles and want to sit a little bit higher. I suppose that's okay. Actually, what's not so okay is the blind spots, which are actually huge. Like, I'm glad that this has blind spot monitoring, because those blind spots are horrific. I really don't, I really, there's no point in my looking over my shoulder to check my blind spot, because there's nothing to check. It's a pillar. Now, as we approach the roundabout, I might as well talk about powertrain and dynamics a little bit, for what that's worth in this car. And it's got a torsion beam rear end. You're not gonna hustle this car a bunch. It's for cost saving, but it rides all right. The rear end isn't too bouncy, and as a rear seat passenger, I don't find it to be overly harsh or anything like that. It's not overly bouncy or rattly or anything. It's firm because it's keeping a lot of, it's keeping a high center of gravity that is very narrow. It's having to keep it very in place so that it doesn't tip over. So you are gonna get that. It's a little bit firmer than you'd maybe expect for something that's marketed as being a luxury vehicle. But, you know, it handles okay, and see how the all-wheel drive system does here. Pretty well. So torsion beam rear end, independent suspension up front. It's not going to handle tremendously great, and you probably shouldn't carry a bunch of speed through corners, but it handles flat enough, and it deals with road imperfections perfectly fine. But what about the power? Well, see, this is your textbook mid-range engine. It's all about the mid-range. It's all about the 2 to 5,000 or 2 to 4,000 pulls. It's made to keep the revs down. It's all about torque, and it's made to just keep you sipping fuel, keep you happy, give you a little punch off the line. But what I will say is that at 1.6 liters with a fairly small turbocharger, it both is a little bit sketchy off the line and runs at a puff up top. So from 2 to 4,000 or 4,500, you're perfectly fine. You're cruising. You're using, I want to say 150-ish pound-feet of torque and 130 horsepower, but that drops off very quickly after 4,500. So you are left with a bunch of noise and not very much forward progress when you start to get up there. What's going on up here? Oh no, someone's, oh, that's really not good. I did check with that gentleman, and he is all right. The tow company is on the way. Otherwise, I would have gone home and just grabbed the Palisade for him. But he was all right. Let's come up here, and we're gonna be very careful so we don't slide and understeer into anything. We'll just see how it does in this roundabout. See how the all-wheel drive system does. We'll give it a little bit of boot. Traction control is doing something. There we go. It's a system made for safety, not necessarily to get you into trouble or for performance. It'll get you where you need to go, but it's not an off-road vehicle. It's an on-road vehicle that does happen to have all-wheel drive and can get you out of some snow. We are going to be very careful there. And it's a very pleasant car to drive. This is lovely. It's not a car that I really have to think about. I don't feel like I'm giving anything up in this thing. It's not creaky or rattly or really anything. The only thing is it's not very fast. But I think that's okay at the segment and at the price point that you can get these at now. I don't see the powertrain as being an issue. Makes 130 odd horsepower, I think it's 137, and around 150 pound-feet of torque, which I'd argue is much more usable than the whatever it is, 150 horsepower and 130 pound-feet of torque that some other cars offer. Because really, torque is what gets you going. It's just, it does leave a little bit to be desired when overtaking. And by that I mean, above 80 kilometers an hour, it really just converts RPM into noise instead of forward movement or acceleration. So it's not the quickest. You are gonna have to plan your overtakes, and it does run out of puff above 4,500. But once you're in the sweet spot, it's great for in town. You never really feel like you're stressing it, and that's just because it can keep the revs low all the time and just lean on the torque. It's quite loud. The car itself isn't loud, that's just, the road is very loud. And we'll slow down here so we can get a little bit of acceleration out of the roundabout. And we'll stand on it at the sign. Ooh, you've gone the wrong way. All right, so I didn't step on it there because someone went the wrong way at me. But, all right, we're gonna see how it gets off the line. You can see what I mean. It really just converts RPM into noise, but that's okay. It's not in the power band, it's way too high up, and to its credit, it does rev out to like 62, 6,300, which it really doesn't need to. I mean, a lot of these modern four poppers are shifting at like 5,500 just for the torque. It's got a 6-speed for what that's worth, so it doesn't constantly have to go through gears all the time like an 8 or 10 speed, and it also doesn't drone like a CVT would. Although in turbo cars, CVTs I don't find drone very badly because, like this car, they just keep their torque, and then those cones were a little tight. And now I think we're going to round out the video by going to get some gas. I like this car. I like it quite a lot. Well, I mean, I guess it's not a bad idea to do the wrap-up now. I really like this car. It comes in at a really affordable price point, especially secondhand. It's got all the bells and whistles you'd really ideally be looking for in a starter car, or again, at a car this price point. It's got all the stuff you need and none of the stuff you don't. It just looks a little bit awkward from the outside, but when you're on the inside, that is none of your concern because you are comfortable. it.